Hey guys, I wanted to share something I wrote with you. I debated whether or not to make this, but I think it could be beneficial. I wanted to share some of my experiences and mistakes when approaching training. I want to preface by clarifying that I'm only talking about myself, and this is in no way meant to criticize anyone. It's self reflection more than anything, but in my experience, being open and honest helps everyone. The main point I want to share is that I think we could all benefit from being more aware of our actions and holding ourselves accountable to them both positively and negatively. I'll just jump right into examples. First thing I want to cover is that it's important to be aware that everyone has different goals in training. We shouldn't judge someone that has a job or is a student the same way we judge a professional. It's okay to have different priorities and to judge others or ourselves for not training as much as other people doesn't benefit anyone. At the end of the day, training is a hobby for most of us, and the only reason to train is because you want to train. Comparison is the thief of joy. I've been on both sides of this situation. I am currently a student and have a much more flexible schedule than most people because of it. And I've gotten comments about my dedication and commitment. And while I do appreciate them, it's important to understand that I am only training this much because I am privileged enough to have the time to do so. Your job and your family are much more important than training, and you shouldn't jeopardize your time or quality of time with them just because someone you know is taking one or two more classes a week than you. On the flip side, I also understand the desire to train so much, and uh, the inspiration someone that has made this their life can bring to you. I've often overexerted myself because I have tried to train as much as someone who's a professional, and at times it's come to the detriment of my physical and mental well-being as well as my studies and even personal life. As a student, while I do have more time than someone with a job and a family, I still have obligations outside of training. Where a professional has scheduled recovery time during the day that can be used for downtime and napping, I use it to study and complete assignments. This ended up affecting both my training and academics, as I wasn't getting enough rest, and my performance was diminishing in both endeavors. It all came from an unrealistic assessment of the situation, where I looked at someone who trained more than I did, and I told myself that if they can train that much, then so can I, without taking into consideration everything that enabled that situation to happen. While training is an important part of my life, it's not my whole life, so it's unrealistic and unsustainable to train as if it was. This goes hand in hand with understanding that the majority of pressure to train comes from yourself. You might feel pressure to come in and train from your coaches and teammates even when you don't want to. But if you actually talk to them, you'll realize that everyone is actually very understanding. Your coach's job is to help you achieve your training goals. So of course, they're going to push you to train more. But a simple conversation about what your goals actually are can help alleviate the situation. And in my personal experience, when I have told my coaches that I can't come in for whatever reason, they are supportive and understanding. You telling your coaches you can't train is probably more significant to you than it is to them. While while you think it's a big deal, they probably don't give it a second thought and certainly don't question your commitment. And when it comes to training partners, they'll pressure you to they'll pressure you to come in because they enjoy training with you. From a personal perspective, I've definitely been culpable for pressuring people into training, but the truth is I enjoy training with my friends. My telling them to come to class doesn't come from any other place than me simply wanting to see them. But I don't have any problem if they have a reason not to train or even just don't want to. But it's important to address that because it can come off as me pressuring them, and they might feel that I think less of them or even will get mad at them if they don't come to train, when the reality is that it couldn't be further from the truth. But just because my intentions aren't bad, it doesn't mean the consequences of those actions should go unaddressed. The last thing I want is one of my friends being overwhelmed at work or at the edge of injury to come in and train simply because they think I want them to. The point the point is we have to be aware that at the end of the day the decision to train is entirely in our hands, and on the flip side is our responsibility not to pressure people into doing things they do not want to do. On that same note, I want to talk about belts. There is a time and place for belts, but it's important to realize that first and foremost we are people, not our ranks. In my experience, no one believes they are better than anyone else simply because they have a higher rank. But it's worth mentioning and clarifying that because some people may attribute more importance to the belt than it actually has. I've run into situations where some of my friends have been hesitant to ask me to roll because I'm a purple belt and they are a blue belt. And I want to clarify that anyone can ask me to roll. I can't speak for everyone because people are entitled to their own opinions, but I generally think you should feel comfortable asking anyone to roll. And on the flip side, as higher belts, make sure it's clear to people that they're allowed to refuse your roll without giving a reason. I used to think I couldn't refuse a roll from someone that was of a higher rank, but it comes down to it. Training can have repercussions, and you're allowed to be selective of your training partners. And it comes down to basic human autonomy to be able to deny a role you're not comfortable having at the moment. You're always allowed to say no, and you shouldn't have to provide a reason. Speaking of rolling, I want to touch upon the subject. Different people train for different reasons, and even people that train for the same reasons are still different people. Make sure that when you are rolling, both parties are benefiting from training. Adjust your intensity based on your training partner and develop the skill of self-adjusting in the roll itself. Within the first 30 seconds, you should have a general idea of the skill level and intensity of the person you're rolling with. Give real reactions, but don't spaz out. There's a large area between being a wet noodle and fighting for the ADCC championships you should be operating under, unless you otherwise agreed before the roll. If you feel that you're rolling too hard with someone, ask them. And if you feel someone is rolling too hard with you, also mention it to them. I've struggled with the latter because my competitiveness sparks up at any time someone rolls too intensely with me, and I reciprocate, but that's led me to a number of injuries, and ultimately it's an ego thing where I have to be able to admit temporary vulnerability. An overarching theme is that a lot of problems can be solved with a basic level of communication, which is generally not happening right now. The last thing I briefly want to touch upon is that there's nothing special about Jiu-Jitsu, and while there are unique things about it, there are unique things about any given subject, passion, or hobby. Training can bring different things to different people, but there is nothing inherently mystical or magic about it. The only reason you should be training is because you enjoy it. It shouldn't be necessary for your mental health or anything of the sort. It's not a secret that I'm bipolar, but I try not to make it my entire personality, so that's why some of you may not know. So if you didn't know, now you know. But I've used training as a crutch and as a means of managing mental problems in the past, but that's a temporary solution that treats the symptoms, not the issue. And in my case, personally, it ended up exacerbating my problems and the whole situation. Training can certainly be used as a tool to supplement your mental state, but it's important to recognize that it won't fix it. And using it as your primary means of psychological alleviation is not just misguided, but potentially dangerous to both you and others. I definitely want to expand more on everything I've mentioned and all of these thoughts, and share more about my personal experiences with training, as they have had a huge impact in life, and Jiu-Jitsu has had a huge impact on who I am as a person. But I tend to be a perfectionist and tend not to get my thoughts out there until they are fully fleshed out. But in this case, I think it's not as important to structure everything cohesively, concisively, and comprehensively as it is to simply get the conversation going. Thank you for listening, and have a great rest of your day.